Good evening and welcome to all of you to the University of Maine at Augusta. This is the third in a series of 6 lectures at the Maine State Forum. The remaining presentations will be held on the 4th Wednesday of the month in February, March, and April during our spring semester here in Jewett Auditorium at the University of Maine, Augusta. My name is Brenda McAleer. I'm the Associate Provost here at UMA, the Dean of the College of Professional Studies, and the Dean of University College. It is our hope, as the only public institution in the capital of the state, that we can provide the opportunity for UMA and for the greater community to come together where we can connect with policymakers whose important work affects our lives here in Maine. The Maine State Forum is supported by a presidential research and innovation grant that was given by the university. The series is coordinated by Professor Mary Lewis Davitt and Assistant Professor Sharon Sawyer, who's sitting in the back of the room, both of whom are from our Justice Studies program. I want to thank Paul Philbrick from our technical staff. He's the guy up in the booth who's managing the technical production and will be recording this for future viewing for others who are unable to be here. I want to thank you all for coming out to participate tonight in Warden Liberty's presentation on innovative programs at the state prison. We're proud to say that Warden Liberty, who is our speaker tonight, is a graduate of UMA. So to students in the room, see what your future could be. He also has earned a master's degree from in leadership from Liberty University in Virginia. Warden Liberty assumed his duties at Maine State Prison 2 years ago. He currently oversees a population of 930 incarcerated men and employs a staff of over 300. Previously, Warden Liberty served 16 years as the sheriff of Kennebec County. While serving as the Kennebec sheriff, Warden Liberty started a garden at the jail that grew into a small working farm called Restorative Community Harvest. That farm program now donates 50,000 pounds of fresh produce to food pantries throughout the state of Maine. Warden Liberty is a decorated Army veteran with 24-year record of service in the Army National Guard and Army Reserve. He served 10 months as a command sergeant major of the transition team embedded with Iraqi infantry in Fallujah. He taught military history at West Point. He has developed and implemented special rehabilitative programs for inmates who served in the military and is a firm advocate of education as a means to reduce prison recidivism rates. There will be a question and answer period after tonight's presentation. I would ask that you, are you listening, raise your hand to ask a question. Wait to speak until you have a microphone in your hand. Professor Sawyer will bring the microphone to you. This helps everyone in the audience to hear the question and aids in our ability to record everyone who speaks. It is now my distinct pleasure to turn the mic over to Warden Randall Liberty.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to come home to the University of Maine at Augusta. For those of you that know me, I believe that UMA saved my brothers and my wife and I, and really guaranteed our success professionally and personally. I believe that the United States Army and UMA made all the difference in our lives. I also believe in redemption. As sheriff, as a law enforcement officer for 35 years, I had the opportunity to go into many homes and witness crime scenes and deal with victims and arrest offenders and work with that population. And I believe with all my heart that all can be redeemed. That's important as I manage the Maine State Prison. I also believe that there are people in position of authority have a duty to assist those that are vulnerable. I believe that I am blessed and I have the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. And I believe that crime is a family affair. And it's not only it doesn't only impact victims and victims' families, but it also impacts families of the offenders. And it's important to remember that. I'm in contact with an awful lot of mothers normally that are very concerned with their incarcerated sons, and it's very difficult for them too. They travel that same journey that the offender does. And I know you moms, I see you shaking your heads, it can be a difficult journey. I also believe that there's a higher power, and I believe that we're placed in positions of authority to make a difference in the world and to impact our communities, and I try to do that every day. I also believe that it's an honor for me to be at the Maine State Prison and have an opportunity to work with. We were at 9:30 when I pushed the information. We're at 9:50 now, and there's a significant spike in populations regarding, obviously, the opiate issue. And it's impacting all of us, and not only the victims of crimes, but the taxpayer. Very, very expensive to house somebody in an incarcerated environment. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk for a little bit about how I got here. I started law enforcement in 1982 in the Army, and I did 3 years in Korea in Fort Riley, Kansas. And that was where I did my first corrections. I was at a correctional facility in Kansas that we had 650 inmates, and it was all hard labor. Drill sergeants and military policemen, and the way we operated was we got them up early, and out the gate they went, and we handed them shovels, and we worked hard all day, and very little rehabilitation. So that was my taste of hard labor, and what it produced, absolutely nothing, and other than punishing people. And from there, I came off active duty in 1985, and as Dr. McAleer indicated, I spent time here at UMA, and while I did that, I worked at the Fairfield Police Department, my first civilian law enforcement job, and I worked at the Somerset County Correctional Facility, where I learned how to be a corrections officer in a civilian environment. It was an interesting lesson for me, as I was able to gain practical experience while I was going to school at UMA. In 1989, I was hired at the Kennebec County Sheriff's Office, where I served a bunch of different roles. Primarily, early in my life, I was a patrolman, but I worked a lot of drug work. And I used to believe that the solution to the drug problem was to kick in doors and bring the individuals to jail. Anybody with me on that in 2017? No. We've all evolved. I used to be the guy that was actually in the helicopter. Remember when we cared about weed? Yeah. And so our solution to the drug problem with marijuana was for a bunch of us to put on camouflage uniforms and jump in a Huey and fly at 500 feet and pull plants. So it sounds a little ridiculous now, but we did that for years. And but on a serious note, as time evolved in the early 90s, the trending was going toward opiates. And in 1991, we did our first heroin case. And I was shocked. Heroin's in Kennebec County. And it was very disturbing. And then since then, it's blown up, as you know. And so we combat that with Maine Drug Enforcement, federal DEA, and then local drug enforcement individuals that work at local agencies. And like with everything else, in education, in law enforcement, it's the same. Very underserved, and we don't have enough resources to do what we need to do. But as you see, law enforcement agencies see that rehabilitation is the solution to the drug problem, and they're getting the message, sort of finally. So I worked my way through the agency. I stayed there for 26 years, and I had a canine. I was a rescue diver. I did a bunch of that sort of work. And then I was promoted to chief deputy about 15 years ago, and that's when I really began to manage the Kennebec County Correctional Facility. And, I realized that, I had 165 beds there, and there were times we had 236 inmates. And they were sleeping on the floors. We just didn't have enough room. And in the county environment, it's very difficult because although we had 165 beds, we had 3,200 intakes. 3,200 people were arrested and sent to the county jail to be warehoused, really, because the resources just weren't there. And it became obvious to me. We did some work with a bunch of collaborators. We created the CARE program, which is the Criminogenic Addiction Recovery Academy, where we talked and we worked in a cohort sort of environment, 6 weeks of intensive criminal thinking, substance abuse treatment, programming. and then we followed them 6 weeks into the community, and we had some pretty good success with that. We even dabbled with Vivitrol a little bit to assist them in medicated assisted treatment, and that went well. We also started playing with the veterans population at that time. In 2005, I came back from Iraq, and I had a different perspective on, people being incarcerated and why they were incarcerated. Would it be a co-occurring disorder, mental health, substance abuse combination, or in the veterans case, maybe as a result of trauma. And that also opened my eyes to other traumas, whether it be sexual abuse or physical abuse, domestic violence. Why do people arrive at a county correctional facility? And we began to work with the veterans population there. We created a veterans pod, which allowed the individuals to be co-located with other veterans and bring resources to them. And we also work with Justice Nancy Mills, who is a state gem, as any of you know her. And she ran the Veterans Court, which was part of the co-occurring disorder court, which didn't excuse the veterans for what they did for a crime, but what it did do, it recognized the trauma that they endured when they went to combat and the resulting behavior and addiction sometimes. And so we did that work. 2 years ago, I was honored to be offered the job as the warden of the Maine State Prison, and it's a big operation. 950 inmates, 300 staff, and there are some serious challenges as it results from the individuals that are there. Anyone that you've ever seen that has committed homicide or any serious crimes, anything more than 5 years, they're there. And we've made some good strides. We've done some really good work there, and I'll talk about that in the next hour or so about what we've done. As you take a look at this slide, you can see that corrections in the state of Maine is broken up of county jails, and we have 15 of those. We have one reentry center in Waldo County. They're doing some great work there, transitioning individuals. We have 4 flagships. And when I say flagships at the county level, I mean those facilities that are modern, the direct supervision where the individual's in sort of a basketball court environment with cells around it. They're mingling, more freedom. They're not in a linear sort of facility. And those flagships are Cumberland County, Somerset County, York, and Two Bridges. It's a combined facility. In the facilities, we have all the pre-sentenced, obviously, so someone gets arrested and they're immediately brought to the jail. So they have the challenge of individuals coming off opiates, drunk, high, were just arrested and the world was just rocked. So it's a very difficult environment. In addition to that, they're coming off nicotine. Can some of you identify with that? And all of us can identify with caffeine, right? No coffee, no cigarettes. So it's a difficult environment. That funding source is property tax. So it's very difficult. And when I was sheriff, I tried to be fiscally conservative and recognize that people are having a very difficult time paying their property taxes. And it's an unfair tax, really. It has nothing to do with your ability to pay the tax, just what the value of your real estate is. So we're competing with the municipalities and the schools for that money. And the average daily population in the state of Maine in the county correctional facilities is about 1770. That's about what they carry for a load. At the Maine Department of Corrections, we have the Maine State Prison, which those individuals are primarily individuals doing more than 5 years, depending on what we have for bed pressure in the rest of the system. The Maine Correctional Center is in Wyndham, and they have individuals normally doing less than 5 years. Mountain View is where we have is Charleston, and we have some minimums there. Down East Correctional Center, which is an old Coast Guard base, which is very old. And has anyone ever gone to Down East? It's an old sort of facility. And so that may be, there's been a lot of talk in the legislature about what we do with that facility. Long Creek is the juvenile center, and they do great work there. The numbers have been significantly reduced to about 50 juveniles there, doing a really good job diverting them from correctional facilities because no good really comes of them being incarcerated. And then the Women's Center, doing tremendous work with women. And my population of preference, although I don't manage females now, is the female population, because I feel as though, in very large part, the ladies that are incarcerated are victims. They're victims of a lot of things: domestic violence, substance abuse, poverty, neglect, a lot of things that are happening. And if we can impact the female population, we really impact 3 generations. Because as sheriff, I'd receive a lot of calls from the grandmother saying, My daughter's incarcerated. She's doing 9 months for probably substance abuse related case. And, I have the children. I'm 68 years old. I have a 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and an infant. Can you help me out and release her? It's tough, very difficult. She's not, how much longer can I do this? So it's very difficult. So if you can help the individual that's incarcerated, get to the root cause of why they're there, whether it be substance abuse, mental health, and assist them in any way you can, you help the children, the grandparents, and the individual. So very important, that population. And then in the state correctional facilities, we have about 2,300 inmates at any given time, 2,300 inmates. And so I have a capacity of about 1,050, and depending what I'm doing with the inmates, and one of the things I have a difficult time with is a thing called conflicts. So if I have 3 inmates that are in my facility, they're co-conspirators, one testified against the other, there's a concern for safety. Or maybe one of them committed a crime against one of the other inmates' families. Or maybe they're sex offenders, and they're an at-risk population in that environment. So we have to be very careful where we put individuals, where they're placed. Can they when they go to activities for education and other things, will they see each other? Is there potential for harm there? There certainly is. So we have to be careful about that. I'd like to talk a little bit about how individuals, from the time of arrest to the time of transfer back into the community, how that happens. And there's some really interesting decision points that as a criminal justice system we can do better, I believe. So when an individual is arrested, we have a choice as a law enforcement officer to arrest or to summons. If you were in Kennebec County 3 years ago, you probably saw on the front page of the paper Sheriff Liberty asking all the police chiefs to stop arresting people. You can imagine how that went, right? Police arrest people. That's what we do. So what I met in a deeper discussion was I asked the police chiefs, the individuals you're arresting, do they need to be arrested? Because I assume that we're still presumed innocent, right? And we have to ask ourselves as a society, why do we arrest people? And we arrest people for two primary reasons. We arrest them for public safety. They're not safe to be in the community. They've harmed somebody or they're a risk to somebody, right? Or for appearance in court. Make sure they show up in court on Monday morning. So you have to ask yourself, if the individual lives in the community, they have children going to school, they have a job, why would you make the arrest if they're not a risk to the community? Why wouldn't you cut them a summons, get them a ride home, and I'll see you Monday in court, or I'll see you 30 days from now in court? Are they really a flight risk? So some of the chiefs would say to me, well, we want to send a message. So in my community, we have 136 shoplifting occurrences in Walmart. And my policy is when somebody shoplifts, regardless if it's a set of earrings or a pair of socks, they go to jail. So they go to jail for a crime that they'd probably get a $50 fine. So if they're arrested on Friday night, they do 3 days in jail, which costs the taxpayers $150 a day, jams the jail up, grandma has the kids, right? They go to court, and they're just released. The judge is just time served, time served, time served. They would never have done 3 days. So it's really something, it has to be a thoughtful process when you make an arrest and you fill the jails. How would you like to spend your tax dollars? Do we spend our tax dollars in education, or do we fill our jails and pay $150 a head just for low-level crimes that are not a risk to the community, and maybe we can divert that and figure that out? Most often, shoplifters in this area are shoplifting to feed their habit. So we go back to the source and the causation factor of them. They're addicted. And until we treat that, they're going to continue to burglarize, rob, and shoplift. So it's really having a broader view on why we arrest people. So they can be arrested. If they're arrested, they can be bailed or held. Another thing that the legislature has dealt with, and I served on a couple of committees regarding this, what's the purpose of bail? Why do we set bail? Is to assure appearance in court, right? So if somebody lives in the community, kids go to school, they work in the community, are they a flight risk? If it's not a dangerous crime and that it's not a flight risk, we have to ask ourselves, why are we setting bail at $1,000? As sheriff, I had a $5,000 budget, and I'd go in on Monday morning, and I'd have 40 more inmates than I'm authorized, and I'd look at the cases, and if they couldn't bail, they couldn't come up with $500. Do you think it's right that they serve 30 days in jail waiting a court date? Does that make sense? For a misdemeanor small crime that they'd probably get 2 weeks for, a week maybe time served. So I'd bail them myself. Kind of odd, the sheriff was bailing them out. But you have to weigh that out. Your tax dollars, $150 a day, 30 days for a crime that they may do 3 days on. Just, you know, it's really, we're beating up on the poor a little bit, you know, and it's inconsistent. It's not fair across the border. Someone of means, pay that and go to work the next day. Someone that doesn't have means sits in jail for 30 days. Something to think about as a society, what we're doing. So they can be bailed or held, and the sentences that occur at the county level, they do 9 months or less. They do 9 months or less. If the judge decides that they want them to do state time, they make the decision to do 9 months and a day, and we get those a lot. Get 9 months and a day, and they go to state time. And that may be requested by the defense attorney. Maybe there's more programming at MCC. Maybe they can get some different treatment. Maybe it's a better location for them. Maybe it's a better opportunity for some reason to go to state time, and they ask for 9 months and a day. And I see a justice up back there, and he could speak further on that. How are you? Good to see you. So 9 months a day goes to the county jail. More than 9 months goes to the Maine Department of Corrections, and we decide where they go from there. They normally go to MCC, where they're received, and a reception, and there is where the real work starts. It's important that we use, we determine what exactly landed them in state's custody. Is it substance abuse? Is it mental health? What are the reasons? And we do a case plan for them, and we require them to be case plan compliant. You know, it's really purpose-driven incarceration. If you're doing 5 years at the Maine State Prison, there's an expectation you're going to work on whatever ails you, right? Whatever your needs were. If you don't have a GED or a high set, you should be working on that. If you have addiction problems, you should be working on that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's purpose-driven incarceration. Generally, 5 years or more is Maine State Prison. 2 years remaining, they go to a minimum security facility. Baltic Correctional Facilities, those in the system call it the farm. It's adjacent to the Maine State Prison. And then they're most often released from a minimum where they're on probation and they're managed by probation and parole. And that's generally how it goes. What are the weaknesses in the system? It's all about the transition. So if somebody arrives at the Kennebec County Jail and they are sentenced to 5 years, it's very, very important that we did the programming so they don't come back. Very important that they have transitional housing, transitional treatment for addictions, a job. You know, if we don't do that, if they're not on the medication, not able to get medication they need, we're in trouble and they're going to come back. So it's important to invest that money, throughout the incarceration and as they transition out to make sure they don't return. Because it's really about, depending where you are on the political field, do we care about people and are concerned with families and them not coming back for recidivism rates, or some folks are really concerned with return on the dollar. If we're spending $42,000 a year, $42,000 a year to house somebody in the prison, we don't want them to come back. And so, how do we prevent that? That's the challenge before us. Okay, the Maine State Prison, the mission is to protect the public by keeping them inside the fence. That's one thing we do. The other thing we do is reduce recidivism. We work on programming so they don't return to the community worse than when they arrived. If we put people in solitary and we give them 1 hour out a day and they do that for 800 days, I don't know about you, but I get out worse than when I arrived, right? I'm not sure how many days any of us could do without it impacting us. Could you do a week in a cell? You think about that. 1 hour out, run outside, use the phone, do some jumping jacks in the rec yard, and then back in for 23 more hours. It's psychologically damaging, and Maine Department of Corrections takes that seriously. One of our primary initiatives in the last 18 months, 2 years, was to reduce the time that individuals spend time in segregation. You may have seen Solitary Nation on Frontline. At one point, we had almost 100 inmates in solitary. We had some people that were down more than 1,000 days. What do you do with somebody that's so dangerous that they can't be in population? It's a real challenge. And I'm not talking about people that arrive because of their crime. I'm talking about people that arrive there doing a 5-year sentence and they kill somebody in the prison. So we have a duty to keep the individuals that are incarcerated there safe, but we also have a duty to keep the staff safe. And how do you do that to ensure they don't hurt somebody again? So we've been working very hard on that, and I'm pleased to tell you that we've gone from 100 4 years ago. We had 45 when I got there 2 years ago. We have 11 today. We 11th today. And we lead the nation in the smallest number of percentage of individuals that are incarcerated in solitary. That's noteworthy. You think about that. All the correctional facilities nationally, we lead the nation in that. And some of you that have been down there, it's remarkable. It's quiet. It works very well. So why do people arrive in the jails? And very clearly, they arrive because of substance abuse. Obviously, that's very obvious to all of us. Mental health issues. We know that our mental health system in the state of Maine is challenged. We know that in the county jails, people arrive that are mentally ill, and there's not much treatment for them. We've combated that a few different ways. One of the ways, anybody involved with NAMI here? NAMI does a fantastic job with a CIT program, Crisis Intervention Team Training. And what that is the traditional law enforcement officer that arrives at a scene. Let's say someone's there's a lady working at Cumberland Farms at 2 o'clock in the morning, and someone's there, and there's an individual acting strange. Maybe they're off their medications. Maybe they're a bit delusional. Who knows what their situation may be. And the person feels uncomfortable. Well, the patrol officer arrives, and he tells the individual, I need you to leave the premises. And the individual's maybe a little fuzzy, and he says to him, if you don't leave the premises, I'm going to give you a lawful order to vacate the premises, or you'll be placed under arrest for criminal trespass, right? And then I'm going to count to 3. If you're not gone, you're going to jail. And then 1, 2, 3, puts his hands on him. Maybe he's a victim of trauma. Maybe, right? Maybe he doesn't like people touching him. Maybe he's been assaulted before. Who knows what the circumstance is? Placed under arrest, a struggle ensues. What happens? He assaults the officer. The police officer calls the jail. I've got one coming in, combative. Combative means I need assistance. So all the officers that are working on the 2nd and 3rd floor, 2 o'clock in the morning, it's quiet. They come running down to the sally port. The individual's fighting, struggling. They assault another officer. Before you know it, this guy that was off his meds and struggling a little bit now has 6-month sentence. And what will happen if he's on Social Security, if he's on Maine Care, he loses all that after 30 days. And how long do you think the landlord keeps his apartment? Not long, right? So what happens is when he's released 6 months later, he has a clear plastic bag with the clothes he came in on, no place to go. He has no way to get medications, no housing. And so is that the real solve? So what NAMI has done is they've done a week-long training, and they provide the tools for law enforcement officers to be able to speak to individuals, to be able to identify mental illness, to talk to them, know the resources in the community, and approach that individual with an open posture, slowly speaking, and ask them how they can assist. Can I give you a ride? Do you have anybody I can call? Do you live in the area? Can I call your mother? Can I call a pastor? Trying to find the resources that are available to take care of the individual rather than default to corrections all the time. It's not a corrections problem. That's a societal problem. We need to bring resources to bear. It's not criminal to be mentally ill, right? So it's our duty to do that. NAMI has done a really great job with that. The other one is learning disabilities. So if that's not caught early, and the individual's in 3rd grade, and we haven't helped them, and they continue to kind of spiral, and they don't get the help they need, they drop out, right? It's easier to cause disruption and go to the principal's office than be embarrassed so we can't read in front of the class. So that happens often. I have about 300 gentlemen that haven't graduated from high school at the Maine State Prison right now. What opportunities do you suppose they have in the economy to get a job? What are those jobs? Maybe roofing, paving, manual labor, that sort of thing. Beyond that, it's a challenge. And it's our duty to assist them with that and with the educational piece. Poverty and neglect. Those are major factors to lead somebody to an environment where they may be incarcerated. Okay, the incarceration rates in the state in the nation are ridiculous. We are the largest incarcerator of any NATO state, as you can see. In the United States, for every per capita of 100,000, 693 individuals are incarcerated per 100,000. At 42,000 a year. Okay? So there it is. If you look at Denmark, 61 per 100,000. What have they figured out that we haven't? Throwing someone in jail is not the solution for the individuals that have those afflictions in the previous slide. Okay, one thing that you should be very proud of, things that are happening in corrections today, there's a lot of great work that's happening. You know, we have the lowest incarceration rate in the nation, 132 per 100,000. Fantastic. We're doing a really good job with that. We're finding ways to divert individuals from jails and prisons rather than send them to jail. The other thing is we've done some significant work reducing the amount of juveniles that are incarcerated at Long Creek. As I said before, no good comes of them being incarcerated. And in fact, stats tell us the longer they're in Long Creek, the less likely they are to have a crime-free life. I have some individuals that are in my facility that were raised at Long Creek, basically, and they learn behaviors that are just counterproductive to their healing, and it's really sad to see. And then, as I said, restrictive housing rates are fantastic. I couldn't be more pleased, and we spend a lot of time with that population trying to figure out what will work with them. You know, is it when I arrived there, we did a lot of the individual they get caught up in a behavior of if they're not getting attention, or if they're bored, or if they have ADD, they're in that cell 23 hours. And so how do we reduce that? Very important to understand that the solution is not to, what they would typically do is they know that if we can't see them for more than 15 minutes, they could be harming themselves. So we have a duty to stop that. So what they do is they cover their window, and my wife's in the back there, and I'm on call often, so 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning we get a call, so-and-so covered their window, okay? And she knows all the inmates. And so he covers his window, and my question is it more than 15 minutes? If it's been more than 15 minutes, we have to go in because they self-harm sometimes. So what that means is 5 guys putting battle rattle on, like they're going to Battle of Mogadishu, shields and all the equipment, and we open up the tray slot, and we warn them and say, come on out, this is your last chance. If you don't, we're going to apply chemical agents. And we apply chemical agents, and then hopefully if they give. If they don't give, we can apply it again. And then we pop the lock and we go in. Well, what happens, the unfortunate part, how are you? The unfortunate part is oftentimes they'll throw feces or urine on the officers. They'll lubricate the floor with shampoo. So when the officers rush in, they slip and fall, they injure themselves. It's a mess, you know. So is there a better way of doing that? There certainly is. So the better way to do that is get the inmates out of their cells more than an hour a day. So now we're doing about 5 hours a day. Okay, we're bringing in things like yoga. It's amazing to see. I'll talk about it later, but the Liberation Institute came in and they certified 6 offenders, and some of them, some difficult offenders. They worked with them for a year, and they became certified as nationally certified yoga instructors. Those individuals went throughout the facility, and they're teaching yoga. One of the things they do is they go down to the special management unit, the SMU, where segregation previously was, and they teach yoga to these individuals. Significant decline in problems because they're able to learn yoga, practice it in their cells. They're able to work out on the universal. They're able to go out in the recreation. They're able to get education and keep their minds busy and keep active. And so that made a big, big difference when we started doing that kind of work. The Maine State Prison specifically was established in 1824, and that was the Shawshank. You know, Stephen King wrote the book about it. And anyone's favorite movie? Yeah, some. It's mine. Yeah. Never thought it'd be the Warden in Shawshank. But that's what it's come to, I guess. So it was established in 1824, and for those who have been down there, it was built in a quarry, and it was a dungeon. I was down. I had visited there in the 70s, and that's what it is. It was a dungeon. And back then, of course, everyone was smoking. So you have 500 inmates smoking inside, and you can imagine the secondhand smoke. And it was a different animal than it is today. In 2001, the facility moved to Warren, and that facility is obviously 16 years old now, and it's in great shape. We went from this style, where it's linear, we walk down the hall, and there are cells, to a direct supervision. It's a modern facility. So most of our pods hold 64 inmates. And those 64 inmates, there are cells that are around the open area, and the individuals, depending where they're located, will be out 16 hours a day doing their thing. So it's a significantly transformed from the old Thomason State Prison. And we have today we have 950 inmates, and a combination of the maximum inmates today are called close inmates, and we have one unit that has 450 inmates in that unit. Some of those pods have 80 individuals, so we have maximum-like inmates, close inmates, that are being guarded by one individual in the middle of them, roaming around, and often it's a 20-year-old kid, you know. And so, but they do very well with it. They do very, very well. When a new employee arrives, a new officer arrives at the Maine State Prison, they receive 6 weeks of training. That's academy-style training that's put on by the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. It could be various locations. Normally, class sizes are about 20 to 25. And the classes are made up of 20, 21, 22-year-old individuals that are looking for work, and also a lot of military veterans, individuals that come off active duty or maybe do 5 or 10 years in the military, and they're looking for that same sort of paramilitary environment, uniforms, chain of command, predictable sort of work, good benefits, and it provides all that for them. And right now, I have almost 300 staff, and I'm down 12. So pretty good in this economy. As we all know, it's very difficult to find good employees. I'm only down 12. So we're doing something right with the employees and trying to take care of them. So again, the cost for the inmate residing at the Maine State Prison, $42,000. And you as a taxpayer should be saying, what am I getting for my money? What am I getting for my money? And any of you here that would like to come see what you're getting for your money, reach out to me. I'd love to give you a tour. Take me about an hour and 15 minutes to run you through, and you'd be very, very impressed, and you'd be pleased the way things are operating there. You'd be roaming around freely with our offenders, and you'd feel very safe about that. It's a good environment, right, Perry? Yeah. Okay, so really, we are in the change business. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to take an individual that had committed a crime, and I have many individuals that are doing 20, 25 years, many individuals. Many will pass there, frankly, and change their behavior. How can I get them to modify their criminal thinking? How can I get them to modify their quick to anger, maybe their willingness to fight, maybe their addiction, whatever it may be? How do I modify that? And everybody's a bit different, to try to convince them or try to motivate them to do that. One of the ways is we have incentives. And so if they're case plan compliant, they can work their way out of that maximum security environment. They arrive and they go to close, and they're getting 12 to 14 hours out a day. But they can work their way through and get their way to medium in a few years, and they can live very well, very, very well. When you come to visit me, and I hope you do, I'll bring you to medium, and you're like, wow, this is a reasonable lifestyle. Some of the individuals have single cells, which is very important to them. If they're well behaved, they can navigate to that, and they can close the door at the end of the day. They can purchase a $200 TV. They have television, just like all of you parents. It's a good babysitter, right? Right? And so think about that. Someone that's incarcerated for 25 years, they have to have a reasonable lifestyle. They have to be able to have some path to some success in that community, and that's what that is. They have their own community there at the prison. They can work their way into a job. I have 130 people working in the wood shop. Some of those jobs are paying $300. So you think about that. If all your means, how many people have $300 of discretionary money to spend on yourself? Right? Right? We're all bills, right? There, everything's provided for. So that they can buy commissary, they can buy soda or chips or something, some treats like that. They can send money out to their families. They can buy things to make themselves a little more comfortable. So we have a lot of folks working. So the keys to success for me, very clearly at the Maine State Prison, is about partnerships. And University of Maine should be very, very proud of the work that Deb's doing and others are doing at the prison. Over the last 9 years, I think that we've graduated 70-ish. 70 individuals have graduated from University of Maine and with a college degree. And we know clearly if you pick up a college degree while you're at the Maine State Prison, you don't come back. You just do not come back. Your horizons are broadened. You see things in a different way, just like every student that comes here every day. Hopefully when they graduate, they'll have broadened their horizons. My wife and I talk a lot about, one of the things that college did for us was it put us in classes that we never would have spent time in. And her favorite was Shakespeare. Nice. Things that some people, philosophy and psychology and things that we never would have picked up a book and really spent some time with, the formal education requires to do that, and it's the same for them. Any of you that visit with me or any of you that go down there, you know the significant growth in these gentlemen. And there's a phenomenon that's very interesting to me, and it's something we have to manage a bit. Some of these individuals have 4-year degrees from the University of Maine at Augusta, in UROC, and they have much more education than the guards do. So the officer arrived at age 18. They've been there for 20 years, and that's what they know. And they've never had that educational experience. They didn't pursue that. And so you have inmates that are at a particular place educationally, and then you have inmates that are here. So the officers, to listen to them talk, the vocabulary, and it's interesting to see. And you've got to manage that a little bit because the officers get frustrated, and But it's really great to spend time with those inmates that have broadened their horizons and are really making a difference in their community. That's their community. That's where they're living, and they're trying to do a good job. They do a fantastic job in creating an environment that works. So stakeholders are important. Individuals that come from the outside and give a different perspective. So when we have people, we have educators that come in, and we have counselors that come in, and we have faith-based individuals to come in. It's so wonderful for the inmates to be able to talk to someone from the outside. Not the same old guard, not the same old warden, but to talk to somebody from the outside, have a different perspective. And everybody that does that, it really feeds them. It feeds them, and it makes them feel human to be able to escape in a class or a book. Things like I introduced beekeeping this year, and I had 15 slots for the class. 50 guys signed up. That kind of thing. Just something that we can enrich their lives a little bit and allow them to feel humane again. So stakeholders, innovation and implementation of best practices, really important that we spend as much time as we can researching what other facilities statewide are doing. What has someone done in Texas, and how effective is that? And we spend a lot of time talking to our colleagues in other states to try to figure out what works, how does it work, why does it work. We trip to other facilities nationally, attend conventions, do research, and we've come up with some pretty good stuff, some pretty good program, I feel. And the offenders really need to make sure, we need to make sure we give them a pathway to success. As you can imagine, someone doing 10 years at the Maine State Prison can feel pretty hopeless. So it's important that in each one of the pods of 64 men, we have a caseworker in there, a social worker, many of them graduates of UMA. And they are working with those inmates to assure that they're in class, that they're getting treatment, they're doing all those things that will make their life better and cure them of whatever their particular issue is. So it's critically important that they have a path. How do I get to G-Pod? G-Pod is the honor pod, and it's the easiest, best pod in the facility. We have dogs in there. They have a kennel program where at the Rockland Humane Society, we have eight dogs at any given time, puppies. We train them for 8 to 12 weeks to make it easier for them to be adopted. And those dogs are in that pod, and that pod is soft. A dog makes those offenders soft, and it's really nice to see. And as much as we all enjoy dogs, they do too. And they live in their cells with them, and they take them out, and they train them, and it's really fantastic to see. That's been going on for quite some time. And then we need to make sure that we have a unity of vision. It's important for me as the warden to make sure that my officers know that our primary duty is to reduce recidivism while keeping the public safe. It's not our job to punish. They're already being punished. They've been humiliated. They've been in the paper. They've been separated from their families. They may have lost their home. They may be divorced. They are punished plenty. We don't need to do any of that. Our job is to make sure that they don't come back through treatment and programming. That's critically important. And it's not easy, because you can imagine someone that worked at Thomaston State Prison where maybe punishment was the order of the day, and then as corrections evolves and it turns into really rehabilitation, those old guards, that's hard for them to kind of to overcome. But we do that through education programming, providing example, effective communication. We do all of that. It was important. Staff development is critically important too. When I arrived there, I sat down with my senior team, deputy wardens, captains, lieutenants, and I said to them, since you've been here, the 25 years you've been here, how much professional development have you had? You know, most of them hadn't gone to college, so what have you done for professional development? And I said, in the Army system, in a 24-year period, I had about a year's worth of academy leadership sort of programming to expand my abilities to be a leader. And so, you know, in the Army, you get promoted to sergeant, you go to 4 weeks of an academy to learn how to be a sergeant, and all the way through to the Sergeant Major's Academy for enlisted individuals. And I said in law enforcement it was the same way. I had about a year of training to be a leader, to include the FBI National Academy, 10 weeks down in Quantico. And I asked them, and they had very little. There's a 3-day course they had taken. 3-day course in 25 years. Well, it's no wonder they're stuck where they are. So it became my duty to try to transform them, and we did some things, just basic things, like I had John Maxwell, 360 Leader. And I passed out a book to every one of them, and I said, what we're going to do is we're going to do basic email chains. You're going to read a chapter a week, and you're going to write a 500-word essay. You can imagine the looks of the new warden got, right? And us in the academic world, 500 words. I know. So I said to them, I want 500 words to explain to me and to your fellow leaders how that chapter pertains to you, how it spoke to you, how it pertains to the Maine State Prison, how we can move the ball forward and evolve us as an organization, and what we can do, you know, moving forward to use that technique. And so at first, I actually had a couple captains come to me and say, I don't read real well. You know, in 1975, that wasn't a big deal, right? Think about that. We've evolved. And so we were kind of clunky at first, and it's a tough industry. A lot of them felt like they hadn't had an easy time of it, you know. And so at first, a lot of complaining in the 500 words, and then it slowly evolved, and leaders emerged, like Captain Drake and others, and it really became a fantastic way for them to grow, share how they felt, come up with solutions, let them be part of the solution, and we've done 14 of those classes now. I taught the first 5, and then I asked those subordinate leaders to teach it, and they learn more through teaching, and it's going very, very well. The last class, I had, again, 15 slots for the officers to take, and I had 45 individuals sign up for it. So it's really evolved the culture and them growing. Every time we do a promotion process, I say to that individual, what have you done to prepare yourself for the next position? Because I have all this opportunity, that's low cost, no cost, and they know now that they have to take these classes and in order to be successful at the facility. And it's nice because I hear the language. I hear them talking about things they picked up and how to effectively communicate, how to be successful in the organization. So that's gone very, very well. Okay, so we have some examples of transformation and redemption at the Maine State Prison. And my favorite, of course, is University of Maine, Augusta, UROC. We have had tremendous success with those programs. If you haven't had an opportunity to go see a graduation and see these guys beam, truly amazing. Who do we have for teachers here that teach down at the prison? Raise your hand. Please stand up. Thank you for all your hard work. These folks will tell you they're some of the best students they've ever worked with. True? Focused, caring. You're not going to believe this. They do their homework. Yeah? A lot of talent there. And you can imagine if you were told your whole life you were stupid, you'll never do anything, you know, you've never been successful, you never completed anything, and finally they graduate with a bachelor's degree. It's so life-altering. It's just truly amazing. And so like I said, we've had 70 graduate in the last 9 years. Currently we have, I think we're at about 48 that are doing associate degrees and bachelor's degree programs. And it's amazing. We just left, myself and Perry just left a restorative justice. We're doing some restorative justice work. And in that circle, we were sitting with 6 inmates, and we're talking about how we move forward with restorative justice in the facility. And those gentlemen are so well-spoken, so educated. It's truly amazing. It's a pleasure to be with them. And it's all the result of the work that they did in the classroom, the instructors from University of Maine that you know, dedicate their time. And not everybody accepts the challenge of going to teach in a prison. Right, Deb? You know, and, you know, at first thought, it would be like, is it safe? You know, are they good students? Will they be attentive? Is it worth my while? And they are. They're all of that. It's just, it's really, it's special. they tell me when the prison first opened up in Warren that you go into the activities area and there'd be 1 or 2 people in class. It'd be very lightly attended, and the culture was, let's go play basketball, let's lift weights. Now if you go into the education department of the activities, every classroom is booked, and we can't find a space for anyone to do anything. And there's a lot of fighting about classroom availability and who can get in. That's a great problem to have, really a great problem to have. The culture is really one of learning and continuous improvement for the individuals and for the organization. Hospice has been a fantastic partner, and I'll talk about that a bit later. Liberation Institute, I'll talk about them later too. The Intensive Mental Health Unit, if you may have heard of this, the dealing with the mentally ill that are incarcerated, it's been a challenge for some time, right? We've been talking about it since AMHI. Any involvement? And so, so we're trying to figure that out. We deinstitutionalized, we promised community-based treatment and resources, and that hasn't always been funded the way maybe it could be. And so, unfortunately, in corrections, we have a lot of individuals that should be maybe receiving treatment rather than being incarcerated. The Intensive Mental Health Unit was built 4 years ago, and that serves the purpose of, if Riverview has an individual that may be so dangerous that assaulting staff and it's a difficult client, they can send them to the prison. And it's really like this unit is sort of an entity of its own. It's managed through Augusta, through central office. There are 5 caseworkers embedded. We have a population of 27 individuals there now. We have a psychiatrist, 2 psychologists there. It's really fantastic. It's quiet. The individuals are roaming around freely. They have free access outside. This year, they have about half a basketball size paved area outside, and then there's a fence. This year, I love to garden, and so I'm trying to push that influence on the prison. We opened up the gate, and we allowed them to go into the field and garden on their own. And you know as well as I do, for those of you who like to garden, there's real therapy in gardening. And so those individuals with mental health issues are out there gardening, raising some of their own food. We're doing a wellness program with them, so they have a bunch of herbs they're growing, and it's been really nice that way. So the Intensive Mental Health Unit is a real gem. If Riverview is struggling with someone that may be a little aggressive, or if the county jails have someone off the street that are difficult to manage, they come to us and we stabilize them. Some individuals there are there long term. Some are there for just 30 days to stabilize them and return them back to the county facility. Veterans Pod. I'll talk about that a bit later, but it's a continuation of the work we've been doing at the county level with the Veterans Court and other work we've been doing. Education Pod, I'll talk about that right now. The Education Pod is a pod that will go online next month. In this pod of 64 individuals, those are all individuals that are pursuing education. So I'll have some college students, I'll have some graduate college students that have completed their schooling, and now they've become paid tutors in the pod. And then we have individuals pursuing high set. So when they arrive in their pod, say we call it going home at night, they go into their pod, it's an environment that values learning. And there are resources there. There'll be 10 laptop stations there. So they can work on their papers in the evening while they're back in their pods. They can have a tutor there, so if they're struggling with an equation or the structure of a paragraph, they'll be there to encourage that. I'd like to double the amount of high sets that we're producing now and encourage that. Right now, if an individual is pursuing education, no laptops in the pods, they go back to a pod that may not value education, and it's difficult to do their homework and without being distracted by the games that may be happening. Restorative justice. The restorative justice piece is something that we pursued last year, and basically restorative justice is healing harm. And in the outside, we did some work with restorative justice, and it was really victim and offender. And if you're the victim of, let's say, a burglary, and at some point in the process, if you never have an opportunity to talk to the person that offended you, and you didn't have a chance to let them know how they were violated, and you had a chance to speak your piece and talk to the offender, something's missing. You don't have the opportunity to do that, and there's a healing process that happens. So on the inside, we're searching for the best way to implement those sort of practices without contacting victims on the outside, because we want to be very sensitive to individuals that have been offended and don't have any interest in being contacted. So we're talking about work on the inside. Restorative Justice Institute of Maine with Ryan Anderson. She did some work last year, about 9 months worth of it, did some surveys, worked with the inmates. You can imagine some of the more entrenched officers, when I approach them and say, how do you feel about sitting down with an inmate that may have done something to harm you and work through that? You know, it's a difficult sell. So it's important for us to sort of plant some seeds, senior leadership, endorse, talk one-on-one with the officers, lead them along, provide vision of how it can improve their lives if it's a better climate in the facility. And then we were able actually to do 2 circles. And we were able to work with some offenders, an officer. And at the end of the second circle, the officer actually, he had disciplined one of the offenders. And when he disciplined him, what happened was there was a bit of a conflict. And he lost his job, paying job, and he lost his housing. And so he went from the honor pod to a pod further down the chain. He double bunked. It was very difficult and was very harmful to him. So at the end of that circle, the officer now it was clear to him the severity of the discipline that he received. He asked me to retract the discipline. So there's a greater understanding. You know, that individual hospice worker when he's trying to take care of his patient, and so it really has borne some fruit. And I'm looking forward to working with Perry and others to move that ball forward. Now we have a steering committee, and we're working on that throughout this year. The recovery pod, in January we'll open a pod that is specifically for those individuals that are serious about recovery. They need to have a safe environment where no one's brewing hooch, no one's trying to smuggle Suboxone in, and we can bring in resources from the outside, AA, NA, peer recovery groups, and that environment be one that's where recovery is valued and they can truly recover. If they're in a pod where people are drinking and drugging, that doesn't work. And so we're going to try to bring those resources to them. And people are desperate for recovery, and I want to be able to provide that for them in a very meaningful way. And then another way that we provide services is faith-based. Individuals come in, and Kairos and others, they're very dedicated of all faiths and lead these people to a faith-based life. And it's been very transitional for many people. This. Okay, look at if you can see that. I don't know if anybody knows Clark here. He is an individual, and these individuals here are graduating with an associate degree, I believe, and the smiles on their faces and the feeling of accomplishment, it is absolutely priceless. I feel, I've been to a bunch of graduations, there's nothing more moving these individuals that had no chance of ever graduating from college, receiving a college degree, and changing now many generations that will follow them because of the education and the value they see in it and the value they'll pass on to their children, how important education is for them. Liberation Institute has been a really good experience for me. I had 3 individuals that arrived about a year ago, and they said, we'd like to do some things. We'd like to teach some yoga. We'd like to teach some recovery work. We'd like to do some mentorship. And how can we do that? Is there money available? There's no money. You know that, right? There's no money. And so we worked with them on an opportunity to become a nonprofit. They worked through that. And so Jess, Pierce, and Kevin started the program. And the way that this occurred, the way it started was I was with Professor Bernheim in one of his classes, restorative justice classes, speaking about restorative justice. And there was an individual in front of me, Kevin, and he, I was telling him about the innovation we're doing in the prison, how we're trying to move the ball forward and make a difference in people's lives. And he's looking at me like, yeah, right. And at the end of the class, he said, I did 7 years in the Maine State Prison, and that's not the prison that I resided in. He said, can I come down and take a tour? Come on down. And he took a tour, and he was very moved by the way the transition we've made. And so he came in, and they're dedicating a lot of time. The yoga program has been significantly transformative for those individuals and for the individuals that are receiving that programming now. It's really been wonderful. Again, just a collaboration with a nonprofit, them wanting to do some good work, and they've done it. Anyone know Candace Powell, the executive director? Yeah, we love Candace, right? She does some fantastic work. So she's been working at the Maine State Prison for 17 years. And I say work, what I mean is volunteering. She comes down there on Wednesdays. She spends most of the day down there with the 20 or so volunteers that do the hospice work. Hospice has had significant impact on the Maine State Prison and the individuals that obviously receive the benefit of that and the individuals that provide that service. Those men tap into humanity like they have never tapped into humanity. To see individuals that are incarcerated for decades working with individuals that they care about and love, they do palliative care and they do end of life. And it is just truly amazing to see the humanity, really. And maybe more so than on the outside, because this is their community. They know these guys. They live with these guys for many, many years. And then to see them pass. We had 5 individuals we provided service to in the last 2 years, and really, really transformative for these individuals. And I can't say enough about the Hospice Council of Maine, the work that Candace and her cohorts do. It's just really moving, really important work. Agricultural program, one that's near and dear to my heart. So, as was mentioned, I did a bunch of work at the county level with gardening, and try to be innovative. I used some state land all behind the piggery road, they call it, by the Department of Agriculture in Augusta. They leased me for nothing 40 acres of land, and I started with, and this is 40 acres of field, and I started with nothing. I had a tiller, shovel, and a hoe. And the inmates are looking at me like, what are we doing? And and I again, no money at the counties, and so we started that way. And I said, we have all day, every day, guys. You know, we can make a difference here. And I found during that 10-year period that I was involved in that, very meaningful work for those individuals. They felt like they were giving back to the community. They felt it was very important for them to give. All of that 50,000 pounds annually went to food banks and food pantries. And they delivered that personally to the food banks and soup kitchens. And they saw the individuals lined up. And it was so nice to be able to see a single mom grab 50 pounds of potatoes, 10 pounds of carrots, 2 pounds of beets, 10 pounds of onions. That's the way it should be done. You know, it's about combining the resources in the community to help the community and those that are more vulnerable. No elder or youth should be hungry in the state of Maine. Do you all agree? Food insecurity is absolutely ridiculous. We need to get our stuff together and find innovative ways to feed ourselves. So the way we did that at the county level is that here in Kennebec County, we have a small seed company, Johnny Select Seed, right? And so we partnered with them, and they would give me all the seed I could use. Fedco, seed company in Clinton, give me all the seed that I wanted. And so if I used state land, it was inmate labor. I had a potato digger that was probably 80 years old, but that's okay. And we were able to produce, 30,000 pounds of potatoes a year. And we should be doing more of that. So that was very satisfying. I ended up, when I came to the prison, we started an agricultural program. They were doing flowers there before, and Greg one of our inmates has a bachelor's degree in horticulture, and there's some interest. And we have a greenhouse, and they were dabbling with house plants. And we started a program working with Hutchinson, Mark Hutchinson from Cooperative Extension in Knox County. And the inmates receive training and programming, and I'm trying to talk them into having a Master Gardener program this winter. I'm a Master Gardener, and I love it, and I'd like to evolve the program a bit more. So we're doing about 4 acres of gardening inside the fence. And when I arrived at the prison, one of the things that I observed, we feed 3,000 meals a day. Think about that, 3,000 meals a day. What do you have for organic waste on 3,000 meals? Just about 150 gallons of organics. And those are going out the back of the kitchen into a dumpster, and we were paying $140,000 to have trash hauled off. What are we doing? So I started talking and working with the guys. I enjoy composting. The way I started introducing them to composting with worms, is I had a vermicomposter in my office. And they're like, what? They're all talking about the worms in the warden's office, And but anyway, so what we ended up doing is we started working composting those organics. And so we took 32-foot rings. They're 6 feet high, and we did the layering with straw, organics, grass clippings, organics, sawdust, organics, and we do that with a ring of straw around it and on top. And we currently have 25 of those. I can put 30 50-gallon drums of organics in each one of those. So no organics go off-site now. They all stay on the compound. And for those of you that have seen them, there's no odor. It's in no man's land. And we're preparing now for spring to rotate that into the soil and increase our harvest. So I was able to save to the tune of $90,000 with just the composting alone. All of our paper products all get shredded and rotated into the compost. It really has worked very, very well. Even the naysayers now are like, wow, it's a good idea. And yeah. And so we're very, very green that way. As a result of that savings, the $90,000 we were able to save, now I'm able to create more jobs. I'm able to hire 12 individuals to do the gardening. And now they receive some money for what they do. So they can make their stay a little bit easier. Anyone that goes, you'll see, if you go, you'll see they're on their hands and knees, and they're digging, and they're working. I can't give them shovels, I can't give them rakes, because those can be used as weapons, so a lot of them are using a cop, or they're using some other tool that they just kind of fabricate, and they do very, very well. They're very proud of what they did. The soil that we started with last year, I have no idea where it came from. It's all fill. And I don't know if they picked up on the side of the road or whatever, but Mark laughs that we're doing hydroponics in the soil because there's no value to the soil, you know, and we're just fertilizing it. But next year will be a different story, and we'll do very well. IMHU had a significant impact with those individuals, and the individuals that were growing it made a big difference. Those vegetables all go into the salad bar. So now when inmates go into the salad bar, it's a limitless salad bar. They can take all the vegetables they want. And that's a good feeling for them. Grab all the tomatoes they want, all the salad. Sometimes we find tomatoes in their cells, and the officer's like, contraband. Guy grabbed a tomato, you know. So, but it's a good problem to have. Fresh vegetables for them to do. And so we've done that. We've done, as I mentioned, we did bees. At first, the chain of command was concerned when I mentioned bees. Took a little bit of work. Eventually, I was able to put a hive outside the fence, and the bees come into the facility, and they pollinate and they leave, and increased our harvest by probably 30%. So that worked out well. I was able to talk a volunteer to come in. Now he's teaching 2 classes simultaneously, and we're building our own hives. We have a few bee companies, one being Swan's Honey. They're going to be donating the bees next spring, and the inmates are very excited about it. So we're looking forward to that. And as I mentioned, vermicomposting. We actually assembled a vermicomposter that's probably 4 times the size of the piano. And I probably have, I don't know, maybe 140,000 worms in it. And it was fantastic. So that whole building, all of the organics goes in. I'm going to bring one here at UMA. All of the organics go into this piece of equipment. It's about 4 feet tall, and there's a blade on the bottom. And you crank the blade, and once a week, the blade cuts off the castings on the bottom of the bed, and the worms naturally migrate to the food. And so they leave the castings behind. We use that for tea, and we use it for augmentation to the soil. That's been very good. Yep. And you think about that. If you're able to reduce, do the composting, which we all agree is important to do, and you're able to save $90,000 at the same time of tax dollars, that's important work to be able to do that and work through that. I think that that's been a win for everyone. The Veterans Pod. For me, the Veterans Pod was really the last piece of being able to help incarcerated veterans that arrive in the criminal justice system. When I first started that endeavor at the county, I'd go into the county jail, and they would identify veterans that came in. And one of the first ones that we identified was a veteran that I went into his cell. He snapped to attention, and he went to parade rest. And I'm like, he's obviously a veteran. He had a high and tight. And what had happened to him is he was southbound on 95, and he had to urinate. He was a passenger, and pulled over on the side of the road. He went to urinate, and he tumbled down the embankment, thought he'd been stabbed, kind of had a flashback. He calls 911. Law enforcement agency arrives. They arrest him for false public report. So, how we kind of started this thing was I grabbed his file. I got a hold of Ann Archibald, who's the criminal justice coordinator for Togus. She was able to get me a DD Form 214, the official record of his military service, so we could verify we're not being duped. I took that 214, put it in a folder, went to see Everett Fowle, who was the district attorney at the time, and said, this guy was a machine gunner, and he was in Ramadi when I was in Fallujah, a very dangerous place in 04 and 05, did 3 tours, comes back a bit broken, right? He's self-medicating with alcohol. He's struggling right now. Should he really be charged? He had a Bronze Star. The Marines do not issue Bronze Stars lightly. And so maybe we should treat him a little bit differently and consider his service as we do this. We worked through that process. He was given a deferred disposition, and a few years later he called me, and he went, as part of his deferred disposition, he had to go to Togus, work on his post-traumatic stress, do some alcohol treatment, and then a few years later he called me, and he graduated with Penn State with a bachelor's degree in health and human services. I mean, just a great story, if we just give these guys a chance. And that's what we're doing with this. If they do go to the vet court, if they do go to the vet pod, if they do end up in state time, now we can go to the veterans pod. I have 64 beds where we have 45 veterans in that pod, and they all have a shared experience of military service. Same lingo, same kind of chain of command, same discipline, and we bring a bunch of different programming in that's specific to veterans. Now I have a concentration of that, and we're actually, tomorrow we're meeting with the Legion for the 4th time, and we're establishing American Legion post in the prison. Pretty cool, right? The American Legion is paying the dues. They're providing all kinds of resources for them, and it gives them that sense of belonging again and feeling good about themselves. In addition to that, we've also included a program. It's called Vet Dogs, and Vet Dog Inc. out of Long Island, New York. We'll have 12 dogs. Right now we have 4 labs, and we have them for 14 months. We have a local trainer that trains the dogs to become service dogs for disabled veterans. So we have them for 14 months. At the conclusion of the 14-month period, we send them to Long Island, 4 months of intensive programming, and then they're released to a disabled veteran. So what that does for the veterans, it makes them feel like they continue to serve. It feels like they're still engaging, helping other veterans transition from difficult times, TBI or post-traumatic stress. So it gives them a sense of purpose. I'm able to pay those individuals. All the handlers get paid, $150. All the assistant handlers get paid, and then I have a unit clerk, like we have in the military, to kind of coordinate that whole thing. There's a real sense of camaraderie there, and it really works very, very well. And I've been very pleased with that. The intensive mental health unit, again, it's a gem for the system. We're very fortunate to have that. If I have a loved one that's incarcerated that has mental illness, I want them there. I want them there. Education pod and the recovery pod, I spoke of those. Those are critical to providing treatment and assistance to individuals trying to climb their way out of the incarceration. We know that individuals that have a felony or even a series of misdemeanors have a very difficult time gaining employment. We know that. We want them to work so they can be self-sufficient, they can get insurance, they can raise their families, and they can feel proud about what they're doing. If we don't give them the education and the recovery, they're never going to do that. Okay, so for me, I believe that these individuals, by far, will be released to the community. They're going to be back in the community by far. A very small percentage will pass there. So the question that we have, and you should be asking yourself, and I ask myself, is are they going to be better when they're released than when they arrived? Are they going to be good citizens? Are they going to be able to treat people with respect? Will they be articulate? Will they be